Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. So Nintendo recently had one of their Nintendo Directs, and I thought it was a very good Direct. I had a lot of fun watching it. Samba de Amigo is coming back. Oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about that since the Dreamcast. I actually watched it live on Twitch, and I was gonna share that reaction with you, but I forgot to record it, and the Twitch stream conked out, so it's half frozen. A lot of my reactions are like this. So I didn't think that would make a good video. There was a lot of great stuff in the Direct, but for me, lover of 80s, 90s, retro goodness, there was one thing that they announced in the Nintendo Direct that was the highlight for me. Oh my gosh.
Game Boy games are being added to Nintendo Switch Online. Game Boy Advance games are being added to Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack.
Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games are now on Nintendo Switch. This is something I have been wanting since the Nintendo Switch launched. I was a big fan of the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console. I love that so many retro video games were accessible through that Virtual Console. And even though we don't have the same Virtual Console with Nintendo Switch, the online membership thing, it works for me. They're giving me a bunch of games as long as I have a membership. I'm cool with that. But the entire time I was like, you gotta put Game Boy and Game Boy Advance on here because they are the OGs in portable video games for Nintendo. The Game Boy walked so the Game Boy Advance could walk faster, so that the DS and 3DS could jog, so that the Nintendo Switch could run. Well, I guess the Wii U kind of ran, but couldn't get very far. And then the Switch ran. You know what? Here's my reaction when they announced the Game Boy games, including when Twitch froze while I was excited. What you got? Oh, finally! Finally! I have been asking for this for so freaking long! Finally! Oh my God! Finally! Yes! I have wanted this for so freaking long! Since the Switch came out! Come on!
Tetris.
Freaking Game Boy, the OG. I was so mad, man. I was so excited. And then when I went back and watched the video and it was all broken up like that and frozen, I was like, oh my God. I was frozen today. The first wave of Game Boy games is of course Tetris, the thing that started it all off. But you also get Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, the GOAT of Game Boy games. Metroid 2 Return of Samus, that's a great one. Kirby's Dream Land, oh that one is so good. Kirby's Dream Land. Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX, they obviously did that remake, but now you can play the OG. That's also a deluxe version of the OG. Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, Game & Watch Gallery 3. Don't know why they skipped the other ones, but they're starting with 3. Gargoyles Quest and Wario Land 3. I'm surprised they didn't put Super Mario Land 1 on there. And it's weird because it's like Super Mario Land 1 and 2, but then Super Mario Land 3 is Wario Land, and then Wario Land became its own thing. I hope they all show up at some point. I also love that with the Game Boy games, they let you choose which style you want it to be in. You can play in Game Boy style, which is the black and green, Game Boy Pocket style, which is the grayscale, or Game Boy Color style, where they actually add colors to the game. That's really cool. I just really love Game Boy games. I don't know what it is, but I just have a special love for that era of Nintendo games, the Game Boy games. Because as someone who actually used to own some Tiger Electronics, you know what I'm talking about, those like really cheapo video games, or like the old school like football and basketball games that you would play handheld. Those were fun, those were cute, but Game Boy definitely revolutionized the handheld market, and they were dominant in that market. I mean, you had Game Gear, you had PSP, you had all these other portable consoles coming out with color, with great graphics, and that little black and white or black and green console lasted for so long. Eventually they updated it, but that original Game Boy dominated for a long time. I remember being so excited for the Game Boy. I used to go to like Toys R Us or Service Merchandise, if anyone remembers that, and they used to have like a Game Boy kiosk and you could actually play it for a few minutes. But I was so happy when I finally got a Game Boy. And I got mine kind of late, but I finally got that Game Boy, big chunky block, black and green screen, 4 AA batteries, sticking Tetris inside of it, ding, 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 and that was goodness. I started out with Tetris and, of course, the OG. Where is it? I got my Game Boy games in front of me right here. This one right here, baby. Super Mario Land, man. I played this very short game several times and had a blast with it every time. But then, of course, the GOAT of Game Boy games came out after it. Obey Wario, destroy Mario. Oh yeah, man. Super Mario Land 2, 6 golden coins, which is one of the first games that they're putting out on this Nintendo Switch version of the Game Boy games. I love this game so much. I love this game so much, and now I get to play it on my Switch. I'm so happy! I think the reason why I like Game Boy games is because I always found it interesting of how they were going to make a portable version of something you remember from the console games. Like, you love Mario, you love Zelda, you love Metroid, or any of these first-party Nintendo characters, or even some games from like third parties, you know, DuckTales and all the Capcom Disney games, Street Fighter. Like how do you put Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat on a Game Boy? They did. Sometimes it would go well, sometimes not so well, but it was just always intriguing to say, how can we make a portable version of a Nintendo game or a Super Nintendo game, but make it where you still feel like you're playing that game, but obviously a slimmed down version of it, a short version of it, a not as graphically intense version of it, but you still get those vibes and feels because they're the characters that you know from the Nintendo games. It just has a special place in my heart, those types of games. But what's interesting is, as much as I played Game Boy games on the go, I think I probably played Game Boy games more at home because of this thing. Oh my gosh, when this came out, the Super Game Boy, I was done. Because, you know, sometimes me or my parents were cheapskates. So they were like, well, if you can just buy a Game Boy game that's like much less than a regular game, and now you got a Super Game Boy to plug it in and play it at home, that's good enough. Hey man, depending on how the economy was, you did what you could. Why you never play all these games, Andre? Because I wasn't rich. Thank you, Super Game Boy. You slightly gave me the feeling I would have of playing certain video games if I had them on the regular consoles. Yes! Yes! This is what I'm talking about, baby! Yes! Then Game Boy Advance came along and was like, let me show you how it's done. Again, not as big as the major consoles, but definitely a vast improvement over the Game Boy, and definitely something that's like, oh yeah, this is legit. Like, if you think about all these retro-inspired games you see today, that's Game Boy Advance right there. That's how Game Boy Advance looked. I mean, they were able to put all of Super Mario Bros. 2 with voices on the Game Boy Advance. This right here, Super Mario Advance, man, that was the stuff right there. Now we were getting some really good games on Game Boy Advance because they were able to make them larger now. They were able to make them more expansive. They were able to do more with it. Now we have more buttons to play with. Just a really good library of games there. And in the Game Boy Advance games, Legend of Zelda, The Minish Cap, Mario Kart Super Circuit, which they're going to add multiplayer to that, so you can actually play Mario Kart Super Circuit from Game Boy Advance online against friends. That's cool. Kurin, Wario, freaking WarioWare, dude. WarioWare was my bathroom game. So, you know, as much as the Game Boy was fun to travel around with, let's be real, the Game Boy also went in the toilet with you a few times. For some reason, there was a good span of time where anytime I had to go to the bathroom, WarioWare was coming with me. I think because they're just short, mini, micro games, so it's very easy to play for as long as you want to play or need to play, you know what I'm saying? And then you can be like, all right, I'm good here, so I'm good to go. I'm good with this game. Thank you, WarioWare. You got me through a lot of number 2s. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, that's another one. I actually played that one all the way through when it came out. Loved that game, so I might have to revisit that one. I don't remember that much about it from when I first played it, but I just remember enjoying it. And this one I'm very excited about, which is Super Mario Advance 4 Super Mario Bros. 3. It's Super Mario Bros. 3, a little bit enhanced on the Game Boy Advance. Super Mario Bros. 3 is my game. I love that game. It's literally one of my favorite games of all time. But what's cool about this version of it is Nintendo used to have this thing called an e-card reader, where you would plug this device into your Game Boy Advance and you would buy these e-cards, you would slide the cards through this reader, and then they would give you bonus things in games. But for Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3, I know that's a wild title. With that game, they had these e-reader cards that gave you brand new levels that you could play in Super Mario Bros. 3. I never got a chance to play them because I never had an e-card reader, So now with this, I can finally play those levels. That's preservation, right? That's game preservation, isn't it? Even when they would put older games on the Game Boy or Game Boy Advance, they would give you like special stuff. Like legit, one of my favorite re-releases of Super Mario Brothers is Super Mario Brothers Deluxe on the Game Boy. This one right here, like this is the quintessential Mario game right here. Because it has Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers Lost Levels, it has all these mini games that you can play, and it's like the only version that has all of that. So just to note, Nintendo, when you're adding new titles to the Game Boy library, if you have a Nintendo Online membership, you get the Game Boy games. If you have a Nintendo Online membership plus expansion pack, then you get the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. They also announced some games that are coming soon, and I'm pretty sure there are others that they haven't announced that are also coming soon. So I'm really excited to see how this library goes. I know Nintendo is slow to roll out these games sometimes, but I feel like just in general, it's just nice to know that these are categories that they have. Now, it should be noted, these are not the first Game Boy games to make their way to the Nintendo Switch. There's been some compilations from franchises like Castlevania, Contra, Mega Man, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, their Cowbone collection. Some of those have Game Boy games in them as well. The only thing that's kind of a bummer is Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, especially Game Boy, had a lot of third-party games. Like pretty much any movie, television show, cartoon, it had a Game Boy game. Sometimes it would be a Nintendo and Game Boy game that come out at the same time, but sometimes they were just Game Boy games that were just made specifically for the Game Boy, featuring your favorite characters. So unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of those games are not gonna be able to be added to the library because of licensing of those characters, which is a bummer because some of those games are legit as well. But there's still a lot of games that Nintendo made themselves that ain't up there yet that I think should be deserving to be up there. Maybe I'll make another video just talking about the games I want to see them added to the service. But right now, I just want to talk about how much I love Game Boy games, how cool I think they were, how special they were to me, and how happy I am to finally see them available and accessible again like this. Because having to try to pull out one of these to try to play Game Boy games, it's tough. I just found out that this is broken. Like, I've had this forever, and I tried to turn it on right now, and it gave me a white screen and shut off. So I've had this and it don't even work no more. Now I don't have to worry about that. Now I can play on the Switch. Unless I want to play DuckTales or Tiny Toon Adventures Babs' Big Break. They're not going to add Tiny Toons Babs' Big Break. But Konami, you did put out that Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection. You also made all the Tiny Toons games. So I'm just saying, can you work out a deal with Warner Brothers? Can you do that? Can we get a Tiny Toons compilation? I'm just saying, you can even throw the Animaniacs games on there too. I'm hoping we get more of those for those third-party titles if they ever do compilations. That's how we can get some of those Game Boy games onto Nintendo Switch. But yeah, I doubt the Smurfs Nightmare is going to be on this. All these third-party games I have, oh my gosh. So yeah, man, those Game Boy games, it's just something special about them. It's just a part of Nintendo's history, and especially a part of its portable history. So I just feel like if you're gonna be putting out Nintendo games and Super Nintendo games, plus they're also putting Nintendo 64 games on there because we got GoldenEye recently, and now we even got Genesis games on the Switch. Why can't Game Boy be there? These games still have quality to them, especially quality for the time that they came out, and a lot of them are still replayable. I mean, look at Pokemon. The basic core of Pokemon is still there from the beginning. That was on the Game Boy. It's an iconic win for Nintendo, and they should celebrate that. Plus, these games ain't gonna go nowhere else. They're first-party Nintendo games, so why wouldn't Nintendo want to just put them out there and have some fun with them? Because it might be just a nice throwback of like, oh man, this is how you used to play video games back in the day? Mom and Dad? Or Grandma and Granddad? Because that's the thing about Nintendo, man. They just have such an amazing library, amazing first-party characters, first-party titles, and I know they want to be cautious about how much they put out there at once because they don't want to dilute the brand, but also they are the brand, they are the place to get these things, and by adding Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, I feel like they are setting a statement. Nintendo Switch is the place to get a library of retro games. I love this. I love having all these games in one place, being more accessible as consoles grow, and some of these older consoles are harder and harder to connect them to TVs or keep them working. I love that we're able to play these quality games that are still good to play even to this day, and also update them, you know, being able to change the controls to be more modern controls. Like, that stuff is cool to me. Like, as much as it's great to be like, we're the next gen with the next gen graphics and we're doing this, that, and the other, and keep advancing, the playability of a game, if it's fun to play, it's fun to play. And a lot of these games from back in the day are fun to play, and I can't wait to play them again. hopefully. This is why I never play new games, because I'm supposed to be trying new games out, but they keep putting out these old games, some of which I played but haven't played in a while, and other ones I've never played back then but want to play now. I'm never going to play a new game ever. So those are just my rambling thoughts about Game Boy and Game Boy Advance being on Nintendo Switch. Very excited about it. I hope you enjoyed this. I also just love having conversations like this. I hope you like them, because I would like to do more of them. Thank you so much for watching. I love you like a play cousin. I'm Audi 5000.